She fell. That's what he told me. But the bruise on her cheek spelled a different story. Those were the first words her husband said when I walked through their front door. Voice calm, eyes empty, like bruises just appear on a woman's face, the way dust settles on a windowsill. My sister stood behind him, sleeves tugged down, chin lowered, the same face as mine, except hers carried fear. And in that split second, 66 years old, standing in a hallway that smelled like stale cologne and lies, I knew exactly what had been happening inside that house. He had been hurting her, and she had been too scared to tell me. Her eyes met mine for half a second, a silent, shaking plea. Don't make this worse. But she forgot something about me, something he never knew. When you bruise one twin, the other one bleeds. And I wasn't going to let him paint another mark on her skin. Not while I was still breathing. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped onto their porch. Not because of anything I could see, the house looked as neat as ever, but because of what I could feel. A heaviness in the air. A quiet that didn't belong to a home, only to a place where fear had been living for too long. The door opened before I even knocked. She fell. That's what he said. The very first words out of his mouth. No hello, no warmth. Just a flat, emotionless excuse delivered like a line he'd rehearsed in the mirror. She's always been a little clumsy, he added, stepping aside so I could come in. Clumsy? My twin sister, the woman who used to dance barefoot in our grandmother's backyard, who carried groceries, kids, bills, and half the world on her shoulders without stumbling. Clumsy? I didn't respond. Because over his shoulder, I saw her. She was standing at the bottom of the staircase, shoulders curled inward, her long sleeves tugged down, even though Atlanta was sitting in one of those warm, late September afternoons when the sun feels like butter melting on your skin. Her hair was pulled back, but not neatly. The way you do it when you haven't slept, when you've cried, when someone has grabbed it. But it was her face that stopped my breath. A dark bruise spread across her left cheekbone, blooming in a storm of purple, yellow, and swollen red. A bruise shaped like fingers, like control, like fear. She smiled at me, a small smile, a shaky one, the kind a woman gives when she's begging you not to ask, not to notice, not to explode the situation she's desperate to survive. My throat tightened. 66 years of life, of raising 3 kids alone, of losing a husband too young, of working double shifts in a nursing home, all settled into a single understanding. My sister was not safe in her own house. I stepped forward, she stepped back. Not much, just the length of a breath, but enough to tell me everything I needed to know. You can lie with words, but the body always tells the truth. People who fall don't recoil when their own twin reaches out. People who trip don't track their husband's every movement with wide, frightened eyes. People who are clumsy don't flinch when a footstep echoes too close. Let's sit, I said softly. She hesitated. He didn't. He guided her toward the living room with a hand on her back, the kind of touch that pretends to be gentle but comes from a place of possession. I saw her shoulder tighten under his palm. I saw the way she held her breath. The living room was spotless. Too spotless. No magazines out of place, no blanket draped messily over the couch, no half-finished cup of tea sitting warm on the table. My sister's home always smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap. Today it smelled like lemon polish and tension. We sat. He positioned himself near the doorway, a guard, a watcher, a wall between my sister and the outside world. So, I said, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. You fell? My sister nodded too fast, way too fast. Her eyes flickered toward him like she was checking if she had done it right. She pulled her sleeves down again, doing that nervous tug I remembered from when we were kids and tried to hide scrapes from our mother. Except this wasn't a scraped knee. When she lifted her hand to brush her hair back, the sleeve slipped. I saw the mark, a deep bruise circling her wrist, the shape of fingers pressing, squeezing, restraining. Not from a fall, not from an accident, from a man. I felt something inside me twist, not like anger, not like shock, but like cold, focused clarity. The kind that fills you right before you make a decision you can never take back. She really needs to watch her step, he said casually, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk tucked into the corner of his mouth. I keep telling her that. That smirk, that confidence, that entitlement, he believed he'd gotten away with it. He believed the lie he told would be enough. He believed I would be enough of a fool to believe it too. I stood up slowly. His smirk faltered. My sister's eyes widened, pleading silently, desperately. Don't. Not now. Not here. That was the moment, the exact second, when everything inside me changed. Her fear spoke louder than her voice ever could. This wasn't her first bruise. This wasn't her first lie. This wasn't the first time he'd stood between her and freedom. And suddenly, I wasn't standing as her older twin or her sister or even her family. I was standing as the woman who shared her face, her heartbeat, her childhood, her secrets, the only person on this earth who knew her down to her bones. I took a slow breath. You know, I said quietly, there's something about twins that people never understand. He raised an eyebrow, pretending he wasn't nervous. When you hurt one, I continued, the other one feels it too. I let that settle, heavy, sharp, unmistakable, because in that moment I made a silent, unbreakable vow. He would never hurt her again, not while I was alive, and not after what I was about to do. The night I couldn't sleep. While Lena slept in my guest room that first night, I couldn't close my eyes. I sat at my kitchen table watching the shadows move across the walls, listening to every creak in the house like danger was walking outside. I kept replaying her flinch, the bruise, the way she said, "Don't make this worse." My mind went back to the time she used to protect me, when we were kids and she'd step in front of bullies or tell Mama I didn't break the vase even when I did. And now, somehow the world had twisted so far that I didn't protect her soon enough. That guilt sat in my chest like a stone. But guilt is a strange thing. If you sit with it long enough, it turns into resolve. By sunrise, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't losing her again, not to a man, not to fear, not to silence. They say twins share a bond that doesn't break, but what people forget is that a bond can stretch, thin out, fray quietly, long before it snaps. And as I sat across from my bruised sister, watching her hands tremble in her lap, all I could think about were the years, decades, that had shaped us into two very different women standing on opposite sides of the same storm. My sister Lena had always been the gentle one. When we were little girls running barefoot on red Georgia dirt, she'd be the one picking up worms after a rainstorm so they wouldn't drown. I'd be the one telling her to hurry up before Mama called us in for supper. Even as adults, life kept us in the same pattern. I carried weight, she carried worry. I fought, she endured. I stood tall, she stood patient. And patience, Lord help me, can be a dangerous thing for a woman. The world mistakes it for permission. Sitting in that perfect, suffocating living room, I realized just how long she'd been shrinking herself to keep someone else comfortable. But to understand the bruise on her cheek, you'd have to understand the road that led her there. It started 12 years ago, the year she met him. We were in our 50s then, both widows in different ways. My husband had died from a heart condition. Hers had left her for a younger woman before passing from cancer 2 years later. Life had weathered us, softened our edges, and carved our grief into us so deeply that some mornings it felt like our bones remembered the hurt before our hearts did. He entered her life at church, of all places. That's how they usually do. The charming ones, the dangerous ones, the ones who know how to wear kindness like a borrowed suit. I remember the first Sunday she brought him around. He offered to carry my purse, something I didn't need help with, and complimented my cooking even though I hadn't said a word about food. A man listening too closely to conversations he isn't part of. That's the first red flag. But Lena was glowing. Glowing in a way I hadn't seen since we were 28, and she'd gotten her first apartment with the big bay window she loved. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. And so I pushed the uneasy feeling aside. I told myself I was being protective, too protective. I told myself she deserved love again. But love doesn't isolate you. Love doesn't ask you to shrink. Love doesn't dim your light, it reflects it. Within the first year, he convinced her to retire early. "Let me take care of you," he told her. Within the second year, he suggested she put his name on her health insurance. "It'll save us money," he'd said. Within the third year, she stopped coming to our family barbecues. "He's tired from work," she'd explained. By year 5, she'd lost her laugh, the one I grew up hearing through bedroom walls, the one that shook the entire house when she got tickled. I noticed every change, every shift, every silence. I brought it up once, sitting at my kitchen table while we drank sweet tea too sugary for our age. "Are you happy, Lena?" I asked. She smiled, but her smile had changed. It didn't lift her cheeks the same way. It didn't reach her eyes. It didn't belong to her anymore. "I'm fine," she answered. "I just get tired easily now." Tired? She'd been using that word for years. I didn't know then how much weight it carried, how much pain it covered for her. The last time she spent the night at my house, 6 months before the bruise, she fell asleep on the couch while we watched a rerun of some old sitcom we used to love as kids. Her phone buzzed at 11:32 p.m. She jolted awake like someone had poured ice water down her back. She grabbed her phone before the second buzz and whispered, "I should get home." It wasn't the words. It was the fear wrapped around them. That night, as I watched her drive away, a pit formed in my stomach, one that would only grow heavier with every missed call, every canceled visit, every new excuse. I didn't know the truth then, not fully. Not until I saw the bruises. Not until I saw the way she recoiled from touch. Not until I saw her watching the doorway like he might appear at any moment. But looking back now, the signs were there, the sacrifices were there, the slow erosion of her voice, her independence, her fire, all of it was right in front of me, and I hated myself for missing it. I'd always been the strong one, the loud one, the one who could fight a storm and walk through the other side. But I'd failed the one person who shared my heartbeat before we even had names. So sitting in that living room, staring at the bruise blooming across her face, I made myself a promise. One carved so deep into my spirit that nothing on this earth could shake it. I would not fail her again. Not now, not ever. Because family isn't just the joy we share. It's the pain we refuse to let the other carry alone. And I was done letting her carry this in silence. The call I almost made. After Lena told me everything about the past 12 years, I walked out to my porch and stared at the street for a long time. I almost called her ex-husband, the one who left her but never hurt her, just to ask if he'd ever seen signs. But I didn't. Because asking him would mean I still believe this was my fault, or hers, or something we missed. But abuse doesn't happen because women fail. It happens because men choose violence over love. So instead of making that call, I stepped back into the house and sat beside her. She didn't need more questions. She needed a witness, a partner, a shield. And I decided to be all three. Rock bottom doesn't happen all at once. It's not a dramatic fall, not a single scream in the night. It's the slow, silent collapse of someone who's been holding the world on their shoulders for too long, who's been swallowing fear day after day until even breathing feels dangerous. For Lena, rock bottom came on a quiet Thursday night, the kind of night when nothing should have gone wrong. I remember it too clearly. It was 9:47 p.m. when my phone rang. Not the kind of ring you ignore, not the kind you let go to voicemail. It was the frantic, trembling kind, the kind that shakes you before you even pick up the call. I answered, and for a few seconds all I heard was breathing. Soft, shaky, uneven breathing. "Lena," I whispered. A pause. Then, in the tiniest voice I've ever heard from my own sister, "Can I come over?" She didn't say hello. She didn't say what happened. She didn't need to. I told her yes, of course yes. But she was already on the road. I could hear the engine, the tires on asphalt, the click of her blinker. She didn't just want to leave her house. She was escaping it. When she arrived, she didn't knock. She didn't call my name. She just opened the door and stepped inside, like someone being chased by their own shadow. Her hair was messy, her sleeves were wrinkled, her eyes were swollen, and she looked emptied, like someone had wrung her out, drop by drop, until she barely existed. "Baby," I whispered, taking her face in my hands. "What happened?" She flinched at the touch, even mine. That told me more than any bruise could. We sat on my couch, the old beige one with cushions too soft for guests but perfect for family who need a place to cry. And for the next few minutes she said nothing. Not a word. Just tears sliding down her face, quiet and steady, like they had been waiting weeks for permission to fall. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. I can't do it anymore." She didn't need to explain, but she did, because that's who my sister is. Even in pain, she tries to make sense of everything, to apologize for suffering. She told me it had been getting worse, that the man she married wasn't the man he became, that every month brought a new rule, a new threat, a new way he found to shrink her world. He controlled the bank account, he controlled her phone, he controlled when she left the house and who she could speak to, and when she questioned him, even gently, he'd tell her she was crazy, forgetful, weak, lucky he stayed with her. Gaslighting, manipulation, financial abuse, isolation. It was a textbook case, except it was happening to my sister. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. She shook her head, eyes filled with shame she didn't deserve. "He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I regretted it." "How?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her hands did, trembling, protective, pulling her sleeves down again. And then she said something that shattered every piece of my heart. I thought maybe I deserved it. Lord. I had to stand up. I had to walk away. Not because I was angry at her, God knows no, but because rage poured through me like wildfire, and I needed a second to stop myself from exploding. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. How long had she been living like this? How many nights had she cried alone? How many lies had she told to protect a man who wouldn't protect her? When I walked back, she was staring at her hands. I don't want to go back, she whispered. I'm scared of what he'll do if I don't. That was her rock bottom. Not the bruises, not the fear, not even the pain. It was the moment she finally said out loud that she was scared of the man she loved. And I, her older twin, her other half, realized something brutally simple. If she went back, he'd break her. And if he kept breaking her, one day she wouldn't be able to piece herself back together. So I sat beside her, held her hand, and for the first time in years, I let her fall apart. You're not going back, I said. I don't care what he says, what he threatens, what he thinks he owns. You are not going back. She looked up, eyes red and raw. But where will I go? What if he comes here? What if... I squeezed her hand. Baby, you came to me. That means you still trust me, and I'm not about to let him take one more piece of you. Not tonight. Not ever. She cried into my shoulder, deep, painful sobs that carried years of fear. I held her until she finally fell asleep, exhausted from a life she never should have lived. Then I stood, kissed her forehead, and turned off the lamp, and alone in the quiet of my living room, with my sister asleep under my roof like a child again, I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to protect her, I was going to make sure he never touched her again, and I was willing to burn his whole world down to do it. Cleaning the bloodline. That morning, right after Lena fell asleep from crying, I walked into my bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "This ends with me." Not the pain, not the running, not the survival, but the cycle. Women in our family had always carried the weight of men who didn't deserve them. Our grandmother, our mama, us. But as I washed my hands, I felt something shift. I didn't want my daughters or granddaughters to ever inherit this silence. So freezing the accounts wasn't just an act of protection, it was an act of cleansing, breaking generational chains with cold, clean precision. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Not because of age, though Lord knows 66 will have you up before the birds, but because revenge has a way of waking you early. Not the petty, loud kind, the quiet kind, the steady kind, the kind that simmers low in your chest like a pot left on a warm stove. Lena was still asleep on my couch, curled under the quilt our grandmother stitched the year we turned 18. Her breathing was soft, but even in sleep she stayed tense. One hand tucked under her chin, the other gripping the edge of the blanket like she was scared someone would pull it away. I stood there for a long moment watching her chest rise and fall, my twin sister, my other half. A woman who once stood so tall she made life look easy. Broken down to this. No, not anymore. I quietly slipped out of the house, grabbed my keys, and drove toward downtown Atlanta, just as the sky began to shift from charcoal to blue-gray. The air was crisp, and the traffic lights were still blinking red and yellow. Most people were still asleep. Perfect. I parked outside Atlanta First Federal Bank, the same bank where Lena kept her joint account with that man. I knew because years ago, before he started isolating her, she'd asked me to be her backup contact. Just in case, she'd said. Turns out, in case, arrived right on schedule. Inside, the bank was quiet, humming with the small sounds of machines waking up. A clerk with warm brown skin and box braids smiled as I approached her window. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" I slid my ID and Lena's old paperwork across the counter, the ones she'd forgotten she'd given me. The clerk scanned them, frowned slightly, then looked up. "Oh, you're the secondary authorization holder." I nodded. "Yes, baby, I am." "And what would you like to do?" I took a slow breath. My voice came out steady, calm in that terrifying way only a woman who's been pushed too far can manage. "I'd like to freeze every account that has both my sister's name and her husband's name on it." The clerk blinked. "Do you need to speak with your sister first?" "I will," I said, "but not before this is done." She studied me for a moment. And then something softened in her eyes. Women know, especially Black women. We can read pain as easily as receipts. Yes, ma'am, she said quietly. Give me a moment. I watched as she typed, clicked, confirmed. Each keystroke felt like cutting a thread that had been strangling my sister for years. After a few minutes, she printed the confirmation papers and slid them toward me. All joint funds have been frozen. He won't be able to withdraw a single dollar without your sister present. Good. Let him feel powerless for once. Anything else you'd like to do? She asked. I leaned in slightly. Is it possible to create a new account in her name only and transfer her half of the balance? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. She'll need to sign, but we can start the process. That's all I need. When I stepped outside, the sun was rising over the skyline, turning the edges of buildings gold. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. The second stop was the phone store. If you control someone's phone, you control their world, their friends, their money, their voice. So I marched into the store, found a young man with dreadlocks and a sleepy smile, and told him exactly what I needed. A new phone, new number, new account. And I want her old one shut down. He looked up. Bad breakup? Worse, I said simply. He didn't ask another question. By the time I left, I had a new phone in my purse, still in the box, waiting for my sister to wake up to a life where he couldn't track her anymore. The third stop was the hardest. I drove to their house. Not to confront him, not yet, but to stand on that porch and make a decision that wasn't mine alone to make. The key under the flower pot was still there. He was predictable like that. I opened the door. His shoes were by the entry mat. His jacket was on the hook. A half-dirty glass sat in the sink. Everything looked normal, but the house felt wrong, hollow, dangerous. Like all the love had been stripped away and the walls were holding their breath. I walked straight to the home office, the one he never let her enter without asking permission. Locked. That didn't stop me. A woman my age has lived long enough to know that every man thinks he's clever, but most aren't as clever as they think. Sure enough, the spare key was taped to the back of a framed picture of him standing in front of his company. He tried to look powerful. Instead, he looked like a man pretending to be important. I unlocked the office. Stacks of mail, unpaid bills, letters from creditors, loan notices, credit card statements. A real mess, the kind of mess that explains the bruises on a woman's face. He wasn't just abusive, he was drowning. And he expected my sister to sink with him? Well, not anymore. I didn't take anything. I didn't need to. I just stood there and whispered to the empty room, "It's over for you. You just don't know it yet." Then I locked the door, placed the key back exactly where I found it, and walked out of that house with the quiet confidence of a woman who had just turned off the power supply to a monster. When I got home, Lena was waking up, eyes puffy, voice hoarse. "Where did you go?" she asked softly. I sat beside her, held her hand, and said the simplest truth. I went to get your life back. The quiet before his storm. After I froze the accounts and shut down her phone, the house felt strangely still. Too still. The kind of stillness that warns you the storm hasn't hit yet, but it's coming. I brewed tea, sat on the couch, and waited. Not because I wanted to hear from him, but because I knew I would. Men like him don't go silent. They rally. They lash out. They search for cracks in your armor. So I prepared the house, locked windows, double-checked doors, placed my phone on loud, kept Lena close. When the first call came, I didn't jump. I was ready. And when the pounding on the door followed hours later, I knew I had anticipated his every move. Abusers don't panic when you cry. They don't panic when you beg. They don't panic when you break. They panic when you stop being useful. And that's exactly what happened the moment he realized his source of stability, as he liked to call my sister, had dried up overnight. It started with the phone calls. The first one came in at 8:12 a.m. Lena's old phone, the one he monitored, lit up on my kitchen counter like it had come back from the dead. Lena froze mid-sip of her tea, her hand shaking so hard, she spilled a few drops onto her sleeve. I didn't look at the screen. I didn't need to. I could feel his anger pulsing through the plastic. "Don't answer," I said softly. She nodded, her breath already shallow. The phone buzzed again, then again, then again. 6 calls in under 4 minutes. When the 7th call came, this time from an unknown number, I turned the phone face down and slid it into a drawer. "He's going to come here," she whispered. "Let him," I answered. and I meant it. But he didn't show up right away. No, cowards don't come in the morning. They come when they think they have the advantage. At noon, the call stopped. At 12:07, the texts started. What did you do? Why can't I access the account? You better pick up the phone. Answer me now. Then the tone changed, like it always does with men like him. Baby, is your phone broken? I'm just worried. Please call me. I'm concerned. I love you. We need to talk. Lena stared at the screen in disbelief, her voice trembling as she read the messages aloud. He's acting like he cares. I took her hand. He doesn't care. He's scared. Because when you cut off an abuser's leverage, you cut off his identity. At 1:23 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Not a polite knock. Not a normal knock. A pounding, heavy, angry knock. The kind that shakes the frame. Lena jumped so hard she dropped her spoon onto the floor. Her whole body tensed. I can't do this, she whispered, pressing her hands to her ears like she could block him out. You don't have to, I said. You're not opening that door. But I was. I walked slowly to the door, wiped my hands on my jeans, and cracked it open just enough for him to see my face. He froze. Not because he was scared of me, though perhaps he should have been, but because he expected to see Lena. He expected her to crumble, apologize, explain. He expected the version of her he'd spent years shaping into silence. Instead, he got me. Where is she? He demanded, jaw clenched. She's safe, I said calmly. You had no right to touch our accounts. His voice was rising, brittle around the edges. I didn't touch anything, I replied. Your wife did. Then why isn't she answering me? He tried to look over my shoulder, but I stepped into the doorway, blocking his view. She doesn't owe you anything. His nostrils flared. His hands balled into fists. I could practically hear his panic chewing through his composure. You're interfering in my marriage. No, I said, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe. I'm protecting my sister. He scoffed. You don't know what she's told you. She lies. She exaggerates things. She's emotional. I cut him off with one raised eyebrow. It shut him up real quick. Of course it did. Women his age challenge him. Women my age terrify him. I'm not here to argue, he said, trying a different approach. Suddenly his voice got soft, syrupy, sticky, fake. I love her. I'm worried she's having one of her episodes. You know how she gets. I almost laughed. Almost. Baby, I said, matching his softness with a sweetness that could cut glass. She's not having an episode. She's having a breakthrough. That's when his mask cracked. What did you tell her? He snapped. What lies did you put in her head? I stepped closer, so close he had to tilt his head back a little. You did that all on your own, I whispered. Every bruise, every threat, every night she cried herself to sleep. That wasn't me. That was you. His face twitched. Rage, fear, confusion, all swirling into one ugly chaos. He opened his mouth, ready to spit something cruel, but then he saw Lena in the hallway behind me. Not close enough to hear everything, but close enough to be seen. He reached out his hand instinctively. Baby, come here. Lena didn't move. Instead, she leaned into the wall, steadying herself, and shook her head. It was small, barely visible, but it was the bravest thing I'd seen her do in years. His face drained of color. He wasn't losing the argument. He was losing the control. You'll regret this, he snarled at me. You both will. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to a whisper so cold it could frost the edges of the door. You hurt the wrong sister. Then I shut the door in his face. He stood there for a few seconds, pounding once more, yelling something I didn't care enough to listen to, but eventually he left. And as his car screeched out of my driveway, I turned to Lena, who was shaking, crying, breaking, and I pulled her into my arms. That was just the beginning, I told her. He's scared now, and scared men make mistakes. We're going to use every last one of them. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't fighting alone. The woman who walked in. After he left my porch, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed to ground myself. I wiped the counter until my hands stopped shaking. When Marcia knocked and walked in later, I saw something in her face. Recognition. She'd seen this look before in dozens of women, that mixture of fear and iron, that "I'm tired, but I'm not backing down" energy. She touched my shoulder and said, "You're doing everything right." And for the first time that day, I believed her. Abuse is a lonely place. It convinces you that you have no options, no voice, no doors left to open. But the truth is, most victims don't lack options. They lack support. They lack someone standing beside them saying, "You deserve better. Let's go get help." So the morning after he pounded on my door like a devil demanding rent, I made a decision. We weren't going to survive this alone. While Lena showered and tried to steady herself, I picked up the phone, my new phone, the one he couldn't track, and called the only person I trusted to handle a situation like this, Marcia Gaines. Marcia isn't family by blood, but she's family by battle. We met 30 years ago when we were both fighting for workplace rights at the community hospital. She'd become a social worker, then later a counselor specializing in cases involving domestic violence and elder abuse. And when I say this woman knows the system, she knows every crack, every loophole, every whisper behind every door. If lawyers are surgeons, Marcia is the one who diagnoses the illness before anyone else can see it. When I told her, "It's Lena," she didn't even ask what happened. She just said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcia arrived with a notebook, a warm hug, and a seriousness that told me she came ready for war. She sat beside Lena on the couch, held her hands gently, and waited in that patient, soft way that invites a woman to finally tell her truth, without fear of judgment. And after a long silence, Lena began to speak. Not in full sentences, not in neat paragraphs, but in broken pieces. Fragments of fear, memories she'd buried, things she thought were her fault, apologies she didn't deserve to give. I didn't want to bother anyone. He said I forget things. He said no one would believe me. I thought if I tried harder, he'd stop. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to disappoint you. It took everything in me not to interrupt, not to grab her and say, "Stop apologizing. None of this is your fault." But Marcia gave me a look, a soft warning, telling me to let Lena speak at her own pace. When Lena finally fell quiet, Marcia squeezed her hands. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "nothing you just described is your fault, not one piece of it. What you've been living through is domestic violence. It's emotional abuse, it's financial control, it's coercive behavior, it's isolation, and it's dangerous." Lena blinked. Dangerous, she understood, but hearing the rest, of the names of things she had survived, shook her. Abusers steal a woman's vocabulary along with her freedom. Marcia leaned back slightly, opening her notebook. "We're going to take this one step at a time. First, safety. You're safe with your sister. Second, documentation. I need you to tell me, in your own words, everything you remember. Dates, times, what he said, what he did. Even small things matter." Lena stiffened. Her eyes darted to the window as if worried he might appear again. "He can't hurt you here," I said softly. She nodded, then whispered, "I'll try." We spent the next 2 hours gathering the pieces. Receipts, bank statements, photos I snapped of her bruises, screenshots of his texts, the threatening ones and the sweet ones that were manipulative in their own way. Everything Marcia suggested, we collected. Lena's voice cracked again and again as memories surfaced. Nights he kept her awake arguing, moments he yanked her phone from her hands, times he hid her car keys, the week he shut off her access to their online banking because she didn't need to worry about money. Every detail painted the same picture. This man wasn't losing control. He had seized it long ago, and my sister had been slipping away piece by piece. When we finished documenting, Marcia closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "This is enough," she said. "It's more than enough." Lena wiped her eyes. "Enough for what?" "For protection," Marcia answered. "For legal action if needed. For freezing the rest of the accounts he can't touch. For filing a restraining order. For triggering a welfare check if he tries to harass you again. And for bringing in a lawyer who specializes in spousal abuse." I exhaled for the first time in hours. Marcia wasn't talking about hope. She was talking about strategy. Lena swallowed hard. "I don't want to ruin his life," she whispered. Marcia shook her head softly. "You're not ruining anything. You're preventing him from ruining yours." The words hit Lena like a revelation. She stared down at her hands that used to tremble, hands that still carried the imprint of fear. And for the first time, I saw a spark returning. Not a flame, Not yet, but a spark. Marcia packed her things, left us with a list of next steps, and promised to return with additional resources. When the door closed behind her, Lena turned to me. Do you think I can really do this? I took both her hands and held them tight. Baby, you already started, I said. Yesterday you ran. Today you spoke. Tomorrow we fight. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. Because for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't alone, she wasn't confused, and she wasn't powerless. The letter I found. That night, after documenting everything, I stepped into Lena's room to bring her a blanket. On her nightstand, half hidden under old receipts, I found a crumpled card. It was a birthday card from him. Sweet words, soft handwriting. A man who pretended to cherish her. I almost threw it away. But then I thought, no, let it stay. Let it remind us both that abusers don't show up with horns. They show up with charm. And letting go of someone who once loved you is harder than people think. It made me soften toward her and sharpen toward him. Cowards don't show their true face until they feel cornered. And that man, the one who bruised my sister and blamed gravity for it, had finally realized something terrifying. Lena wasn't just hiding. She was leaving him. And abusers don't get abandoned. Not in their minds, not in their world. So he came back swinging. It started the next morning, a little after sunrise. The house was quiet. I was making oatmeal. Lena was sitting at the table staring into her tea like it was going to tell her the future. Then, bang, bang, bang. The pounding hit the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Lena froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Her face turned the color of old paper. I walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. There he was, standing in my driveway like he owned the pavement. Hair messy, tie loose, face flushed with the kind of rage that comes from losing control of something he thought he owned. He wasn't even pretending anymore. "Open the damn door," he shouted. I didn't flinch. I'd seen louder men fall apart faster. But Lena... Her body folded in on itself like a scared child. She covered her ears and whispered, "Please, please." I put my hand on her back. "He can't get in, baby. You're safe." But safety didn't stop the memories, didn't stop the fear, didn't stop the way the pounding echoed through her bones. I walked to the door and called out through it, "You need to leave, now." "Where is she?" he yelled. Like my home was a cage he had the right to open. "She doesn't want to see you." He laughed, a bitter, unhinged sound. "She doesn't know what she wants. She's sick. She's confused. She always gets like this. You're making it worse." Ah, the classic abuser's script. Rewrite her reality. Invalidate her emotions. Call her unstable. Blame the woman who finally ran. I cracked the door just enough to look him dead in the eye. "You don't get to define her anymore." His jaw twitched. His eyes turned sharp. "You think you can come between us?" he hissed. "You think you can turn her against me?" "She did that part herself," I said calmly. That made him step back, not in fear, but in shock. He had no mental space for a version of Lena who had agency, or a version of me who wasn't scared of him. He took a deep breath, forced a smile, and leaned in. "Listen, we're adults. Let's talk. I love your sister. She's fragile. She needs me." Fragile? I almost slammed the door in his face right then. But I didn't. Because behind me I heard footsteps. Lena. She was standing halfway down the hall, hugging herself, trembling. But standing. She wasn't hiding in the guest room. She wasn't curled on my couch. She walked toward the danger, even if her knees shook with every step. "Go home," she whispered. The words barely left her lips, but they were enough. He blinked. "What?" "Baby, no. You're just overwhelmed. You're not thinking straight. Go. Home," she repeated louder this time. He tried to push past me, but I blocked the doorway with both arms. "You heard her?" I said. His face twisted, something dark rising to the surface. "You think she can survive without me? You think she can make it out there?" He jabbed a finger toward her. "She can't take care of herself. I've been doing everything." "That's the problem," I cut in. "You made her forget she could." Lena let out a breath, a shaky, painful exhale, like she'd been holding it for 10 years. He stepped forward again, his voice low and venomous. "You're going to regret this. Both of you. You have no idea what you've just started." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, leaning forward. We haven't even started yet. I shut the door. This time, the pounding didn't come right away. He lingered. I could hear him breathing on the other side, heavy, uneven, animal-like. Then finally, he stomped down the porch steps and peeled out of the driveway. Lena collapsed onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. I can't believe I said it, she whispered. Did I really tell him to go home? You did, I said, brushing her hair back. And you meant it. She started crying again, but these weren't fear tears. These were relief tears. The tears of someone finally hearing her own voice again after years of silence. But I knew better than to get comfortable. Men like him don't disappear. They regroup. They strategize. They come back with new tactics. And sure enough, an hour later, my phone buzzed. Marcia, I answered. Got a heads up from the sheriff's office, she said. He just tried to file a missing person report on your sister. My jaw locked. He what? Don't worry, Marcia said. They didn't accept it, but it tells me something important. What's that? He's escalating, which means you need to be ready for the next step. I stared at my sister, exhausted, fragile, brave, and felt something in me harden like steel. We're ready, I said. But I already knew the next battle wouldn't be at my door. It would be in courtrooms, police stations, banks, and offices, and in each one he'd try to twist the truth. But that was fine, because I had a plan too, and soon he was going to lose everything he thought he controlled. Practicing her voice. Before the switch, before I put on her clothes and stepped into her skin, I spent an hour practicing her voice. Not just the sound, but the hesitations, the softness, the way she apologized before asking anything, the way she lowered her volume when she felt unsafe. It broke my heart to mimic it, because I remembered when she didn't sound like that, when she was bold and bright and full of music. So when I finally texted him pretending to be her, I didn't just play a role. I honored the woman she used to be and the woman she was fighting to become again. Most people don't understand twin energy. They think it's just matching birthdays and childhood secrets. But twins know, especially twins like me and Lena, that sometimes the only way to save one is for the other to step into the fire. And the day after he tried to file a missing person report on the woman he'd been abusing, I realized fire was exactly what he deserved. Marcia came back that afternoon, armed with folders, pamphlets, forms, legal steps, everything a woman escaping domestic violence might need. She spread the papers across my kitchen table like maps in a war room. Lena stared at them, overwhelmed, hands trembling. This is too much, she whispered. What if he finds me? What if he comes back? What if... I grabbed her shoulders gently. Baby, breathe. You're safe here, and you're not alone. But I'm scared, she said, tears welling. I don't know how to face him. That was the moment it clicked. Not just clicked, locked into place. She couldn't face him. But I could. I'd been waiting for a chance to stand between them. Now I had one. I glanced at Marcia. She raised one eyebrow, a silent, knowing question. You're thinking something? She said. I am, I answered, and I need you to tell me if it's crazy. She gestured for me to continue. I looked at Lena, at her small frame, at her bruised cheek fading just enough to hide with makeup, at her fear trying so hard to stand upright. Then I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. Same face, same eyes, same bone structure, same curves softened by age, same smile, just sharper. One twin broken, the other ready to burn the world down. We look alike, I said slowly. More than alike. We're identical, even now. Marcia's lips parted. Oh my God. Lena blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying, I said steady and deliberate, that he can't hurt you if he thinks he's talking to me. The room went still, silent, electric. Marcia leaned forward, her mind already racing. You're proposing a switch? Yes. Lena's eyes widened with fear. No, I can't let you do that. He's dangerous. What if he realizes it's you? What if he... Then he'll try that mess on the wrong woman, I said, and I won't flinch, not once. Marcia took a slow breath. You know this could be effective. He's already unstable. If he thinks he still has access to her, even emotionally, he'll slip. Fast. He'll say things, I said, do things, confess things he'd never say if Lena confronted him. And we document everything, Marcia added. Recordings, screenshots, messages, A full trail of proof. Lena shook her head, terrified. I don't want you to get hurt. I cupped her face gently. He hurt you. That's all I need to know. She sobbed into my shoulder, her relief mixing with fear. But the decision had already been made, carved into my spine. I wasn't just going to protect her. I was going to bait him, expose him, strip him of every ounce of power he'd stolen. Marcia sat up straighter. If we're doing this, we need to do it right. First, clothes. She opened Lena's overnight bag, pulled out a soft blue blouse and jeans. Something simple, something he'd seen her in 100 times. Put these on, she told me. I changed in the bedroom. When I looked in the mirror, even I felt a flicker of disbelief. It wasn't just resemblance, it was her. The tired elegance, the quiet presence, the curve of the shoulders. When I stepped back into the living room, Lena gasped. You look like me, she whispered. Marcia nodded. Good, now makeup. She covered my freckles with foundation, softened my sharper features, added a touch of brown eyeshadow Lena always wore. She used a light concealer to mimic the healing bruise on Lena's cheek. Then came the final test. Say something he'd expect, Marcia said. I swallowed, then spoke softly. Hey, I'm sorry I've been distant. Can we talk? Lena covered her mouth. That was her voice, her tone, her cadence. I had become my sister. Now it was time to use it. We waited until early evening, when he was most likely to be on his phone but still full of ego from the workday. I sat at the table, hands steady, and typed, Lena, can we talk? I'm confused. I don't know what to do. It was cruel. It was manipulative. It was exactly what he'd done to her for years. He responded in under 10 seconds. Baby? Where are you? I've been worried sick. Please talk to me. Pathetic. I typed again, slow and shaky, exactly as she would have. I need to understand why things have gotten so hard between us. The typing bubbles appeared instantly. Marcia hit record on her phone. He sent, because you make things hard. You always push. You always question me. If you'd just listen, none of this would have happened. Marcia whispered, Good. Keep going. I typed, Did you ever mean to hurt me? His reply made the hair on my arm stand up. Sometimes you need to be scared so you take me seriously. There it was. The confession we'd been waiting for. And he kept going. If you hadn't forced me to raise my voice, I wouldn't have laid hands on you. You drive me to it. Lena burst into tears. I squeezed her hand. Marcia shook her head in awe. This is gold. The judge will destroy him with this. He wasn't done. Just come home. You belong here. We're not done. You're mine. I typed one last message. We'll talk tomorrow. He sent 3 hearts and a delusional, I love you. Then Marcia whispered, Tomorrow, we end him. And for the first time in weeks, Lena smiled. Small, fragile, but real. Because now, we had evidence, we had a plan, and he was talking to the wrong sister. Some men don't care who they hurt behind closed doors, as long as no one sees it, and that man, my sister's husband, had built his whole life around the illusion of being the good one. The kind neighbor, the helpful coworker, the loving husband. A public reputation is the shield of every abuser. So the fastest way to break one? Crack the shield in front of an audience. The morning after our text conversation, I dressed in Lena's clothes again. Soft cardigan, simple jeans, a pair of flats, too gentle for my taste. I tied my hair the way she did, low and loose. Lena stood in the hallway watching me transform. She looked terrified and grateful and guilty all at the same time. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I touched her cheek. I do, because he's expecting her, and you're not ready. But I am. Marcia arrived with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Every screenshot, every transcript, every piece of documentation we had gathered. This man is about to implode, she said confidently. You just need to push the first domino. And what's the first domino? I asked. She smiled, a sharp, knowing smile. Show up? He was at a community luncheon that afternoon, one of those gatherings where people pretend they care about charity while they gossip about who's falling apart behind the scenes. Perfect place for him, even better for me. Marcia drove, Lena stayed home. I walked into that banquet hall like a ghost wearing her skin. He saw me before I even reached the entrance. His eyes widened, relief, anger, confusion, hope, all crashing into each other like cars on a highway. He rushed toward me, grabbing my arms a little too tightly for a public place. Baby, thank God. You scared me. I pulled back, just slightly, the way Lena would when she was intimidated, not the way I would when I'm 2 seconds from breaking someone's fingers. His co-workers noticed us. His boss noticed us. A few church members turned their heads. Good. Let them watch. I just needed some space, I said softly, dropping my gaze like Lena always did. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You shouldn't have frozen the accounts. You made me look stupid. Oh, he was angry and reckless. But he forgot something crucial. Public places have ears. I softened my voice. Can we sit and talk? He nodded eagerly. He wanted privacy so he could control the conversation, but I wanted witnesses, so he couldn't. We sat at a table near the wall, with people mingling close enough to hear pieces if he got sloppy. Marcia positioned herself across the room, pretending to chat with someone, phone recording in her purse. He exhaled, placing his hand over mine, the gesture of a caring husband. Fake, practiced, performative. You know I only get upset because I care, he said, squeezing my knee under the table. The pressure was too firm, too insistent, a warning disguised as affection. Upset? I whispered, just loud enough for the woman at the next table to glance over. Like when you raised your voice? Baby, he said through gritted teeth, I told you I didn't mean to scare you. You hear things wrong. Bingo, I shrank back, a Lena move, and whispered, but you did scare me. Heads turned, subtle but undeniable. He realized people were listening. His smile instantly snapped into place, too wide to be real. Let's not do this here, he said. We never do it anywhere, I whispered, because you don't want people to know. He stiffened. Know what? I let a single tear fall, not because I needed to, but because Lena would have. That you hurt me. Silence hit the table like a dropped plate. A woman standing behind him pretended not to listen, but her eyes widened. He panicked. Lower your voice, he hissed, right now. Ah, there it was. The real him, barely hidden under the mask. I blinked up at him. Why? Are you afraid someone will hear the truth? He grabbed my wrist under the table, not enough to bruise, but enough to tell me who he really was. It was over in 1 second, but people saw. 2 men at the buffet table glanced in our direction. He let go quickly, realizing his mistake. Sweetheart, he said too loudly, you're emotional. Let's talk outside. No, I said just as loud. I want to talk here. His eyes shifted around the room, scanning, calculating, desperate. This was the first crack in his facade. And the best part? I wasn't even done. He leaned forward, voice shaking. If you don't stop this, I cut him off. I have everything saved, I whispered. All your messages, all your threats. Every time you blamed me for the things you did. His face drained of color. He looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. You wouldn't... I already did. The panic rolled through him so violently that even people 3 tables away noticed. His boss approached, clearing his throat. Everything okay here? He jumped up. Yes, of course. My wife is just... I stood too. No, I said softly but firmly. I'm not. Gasps, whispers, eyes locked on us. His world, the one he thought he controlled, had begun to collapse. He grabbed his jacket, muttering angrily, and stormed out of the luncheon. Marcia walked up behind me seconds later. That, she said softly, was the moment he realized he's losing. I exhaled. And next? I asked. She handed me a manila envelope. Next, she said, we go legal. There's a moment, a tiny, quiet moment, when a woman who has been silenced for years finally sees the door to freedom crack open. For Lena, that moment came the morning after the luncheon, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea she hadn't touched. She kept wringing her hands the way she used to before piano recitals, except now the stakes were far higher. Marcia sat across from us with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Today, she said, tapping the folder, we file. Lena swallowed hard. File what exactly? Everything, Marcia answered. A petition for a protective order, a report of coercive control, a record of physical harm, a financial abuse claim. documentation of intimidation and harassment, and a request for emergency separation of assets. Lena's eyes widened like someone had just placed a live grenade in her hands. "I don't want to ruin his life," she whispered for the second time that week. "No," Marcia said firmly. "You're not ruining it. You're reporting it." I squeezed Lena's hand. "He ruined it himself." We arrived at the courthouse at 9:02 a.m. It was a tall beige building with stone steps and metal detectors and fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look like they haven't slept. Lena took one trembling step onto the marble floor. "You can still back out," I told her gently. She lifted her chin just a little, the way she used to when she defended me from playground bullies when we were 8. "No, I'm doing this." Good. Because everything we'd done, every message collected, every bruise photographed, every tear wiped from her face, had led to this day. The clerk at the front desk scanned the paperwork. Her eyebrows lifted, slightly, professionally, but enough for me to know she was reading the severity between the lines. "Do you want to file for an emergency protective order as well?" the clerk asked. "Yes," Lena whispered. "Are you in immediate danger?" Lena froze. Her throat moved like she was trying to swallow words too sharp to speak. I spoke for her. "She is. And we have evidence." Marcia opened the folder like she was revealing a weapon. The clerk's eyes skimmed over screenshots of his threats, messages admitting to making her scared so she'd listen, and the video of him grabbing my wrist at the luncheon. The clerk nodded slowly. "You'll see a judge today." We waited in a small room with chairs that felt like they were made of punishment. I watched my sister breathe through her fear like a woman learning how to re-inhabit her own lungs. He called her phone, again, and again, and again. But it wasn't her phone anymore. It was mine, hidden in my purse, recording every call, every voicemail, every slip of anger. Each message grew more frantic. "Where are you?" "You're exaggerating everything." "If you file anything, you'll regret it." "You won't win against me. You belong with me. Do you hear me?" I looked at Marcia. She nodded. "Save all of it." At 11:16 a.m., they called Lena's name. We stepped inside a small courtroom, just a judge, a recorder, a quiet air of seriousness. "Ms. Carter," the judge said, "I've reviewed your request. Would you like to explain in your own words why you're seeking protection?" Lena looked at me. I nodded. She stepped forward, shaky but standing. "Your Honor," she began softly, "I didn't realize I was being abused. Not at first. I thought I was failing as a wife. I thought I wasn't enough. I thought I deserved it." The judge's eyes softened. Lena continued, voice cracking, "But my sister helped me see the truth. He controlled my money, my phone, my friends, my movements. He yelled at me. He scared me. And lately, he's been getting worse." She paused. "He hurt me, and I'm afraid of what he'll do if I go back." There it was, the truth, unclothed and trembling in the center of the room. The judge turned to Marcia. "You're her advocate?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcia said, sliding the thick folder across the table. "And we've brought documentation." The judge flipped through the pages. Screenshots, photos of bruises, bank evidence, transcriptions of threats, the luncheon video, showing the moment he grabbed my wrist, thinking I was Lena. "This," the judge said quietly, "is substantial." He took a long breath. "Ms. Carter, I'm granting an emergency protective order effective immediately." Lena's knees buckled. She grabbed my arm. "It means," the judge continued, "your husband cannot come near you, contact you, visit your home, your workplace, or your family members. If he tries, he will be arrested." Lena began to cry, not loud, not dramatic, but in a way that made my own eyes burn. It was the sound of a soul exhaling. The judge added, "We will schedule a full hearing in 10 days. Between now and then, stay somewhere safe." "She's with me," I said. He nodded. "Good. You're doing the right thing." For the first time in years, someone with authority said those words to her, and for the first time since this all began, my sister believed them. When we walked out of that courthouse, the sky felt bigger, brighter, worth looking up at again. Marcia placed a hand on Lena's shoulder. "This is step 1, she said. Next, we prepare for court. Full exposure. And him? I asked. Marcia smiled. Oh, he's going to panic, and panic makes men like him sloppy. Let him be sloppy. I looked at Lena. You ready? I asked. She nodded, small but firm. I'm ready. And with that, the real unraveling of his life began. The thing about abusive men is this: they never believe it's over until the cuffs are on their wrists. Even after the emergency protective order, even after the judge's warning, even after Lena finally spoke her truth, he still thought he owned her. Men like him don't see women. They see mirrors, reflections of their ego, their control, their image. And when that mirror cracks, oh, they bleed rage. The first sign of desperation came the next morning. A white SUV idled across the street from my house, engine running, windows tinted too dark for Georgia law. Not moving, not leaving, watching. He was too much of a coward to knock on the door again, not with a protective order hanging over his head, but he wanted us to know he was there. Lena saw it through the blinds and went pale, her breath hitching. He's going to take me, she whispered. He's going to take me back. No, baby, I said, pulling her into my arms. He can't take what doesn't belong to him. I called Marcia. She didn't hesitate. This is stalking, she said. Document everything. So I grabbed my phone and filmed. Slow, steady, clear. License plate, car model. Timestamp. Receipt after receipt after receipt. If he wanted to play dumb, I was going to serve him the truth with a side of legal consequences. The second sign came at noon. He started calling everyone. Lena's old coworkers, her church friends, her Bible study group, even her hairstylist. He told them Lena was sick. He told them I brainwashed her. He told them she wasn't safe with me. He told them she was spiraling mentally. Ah, the classic smear campaign. If he couldn't control her directly, he would try to control the narrative. People like him always weaponize community, but there was one problem. Those same people had seen him grab my wrist at the luncheon. They'd seen Lena trembling behind me. They'd heard the crack in her voice. Rumors had already started spreading, and not the ones he wanted. By 3 p.m., the pastor of their church called me. Sister, he said gently, is Lena all right? We heard something happened? I told him everything. And when I finished, the line went quiet. Then he said, she doesn't need to defend herself here. We'll protect her. Another shield for her, another wall against him. The smear campaign backfired, but the third sign? That's when it got dangerous. At 6:18 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Marcia. Be ready. He just attempted to file for spousal support. I nearly dropped the phone. That man wants alimony? I shouted. Lena's jaw dropped. What? Yes. He had filed a claim arguing that he was financially dependent on her and deserved support. A man who hurt her. A man who drained her accounts. A man who tried to control her life. He now wanted her money. The audacity didn't even surprise me. The desperation did. He's unraveling, Marcia said when I called her. This is his last grasp. When control slips, men like him reach for whatever they can. Money, reputation, lies. Anything. He's not getting a damn dime, I said. Good, she replied. Because tomorrow, everything changes. The next day was the hearing, the formal court date to extend the protective order and present evidence. Lena was terrified, hands cold, legs shaking, face pale. I helped her get dressed, soft blouse, neutral makeup, hair pinned back neatly. She looked fragile but not helpless. She looked like a woman coming out of the storm. When we arrived at the courthouse, he was already there, standing near the entrance in a crisp button-down, pretending to look calm, but his hands were shaking, his knee bouncing, his jaw clenched. For the first time, he looked afraid. He saw Lena and froze. For a flicker of a moment, he looked like a man begging for mercy, but then he saw me beside her, and his eyes burned with hatred. Good. Let him burn. Courtrooms have their own kind of silence, an echoing, heavy silence that makes lies feel louder. When the judge called the case, Lena stepped forward. He followed. I stayed right behind her. Marcia sat on her left. Our lawyer, a tall black woman with box braids named Attorney Holt, stood on her right. He was outnumbered, outclassed, outmaneuvered. His lawyer wasn't even present. He couldn't afford one yet. Attorney Holt started, Your Honor, we have extensive evidence of coercive control, intimidation, emotional abuse, financial abuse, and physical harm. She laid down the stack of documents. It hit the table with a satisfying thud. The judge flipped through the evidence. His jaw tightened more with each page. Screenshots where he admitted purposefully scaring her. Voicemails where he threatened she'd regret it. Footage of him grabbing my wrist at the luncheon, thinking I was Lena. Photos of bruises. And finally, the video of his SUV idling outside my home after the protective order. The judge looked furious. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "this is overwhelming evidence of abusive and controlling behavior." His face twisted. "It's not. She's lying. She's confused." "Enough," the judge snapped. "You are hereby placed under a full 1-year protective order. Violation will result in immediate arrest." Lena exhaled a sob, not of fear, but release. "And regarding your claim for spousal support," the judge continued. Lena braced herself. "Denied." He stiffened. "And I will be referring your financial conduct for investigation." He blanched. Actually blanched? His last lifeline snapped. When we walked out of that courtroom, the sun hit Lena's face in a way I hadn't seen in years. Warm, soft, free. She whispered, "I can breathe." And I held her close, because the truth was simple. This wasn't just justice. This was rebirth. And the man who thought he owned her, he was watching his world crumble in real time. The day I watched him break. The day before the final hearing, I saw him from a distance, outside the courthouse, talking to himself, pacing, sweating through his shirt. He looked like a man drowning in the ocean he dug himself. And for 1 second, just one, I wondered if I should feel sorry for him. But then I remembered Lena's bruises, her shaking hands, her quiet cries in my living room, her years of silence, and every drop of pity dried in my chest. Some men need consequences the way sick bodies need medicine, and the next morning he finally swallowed the dose he'd been running from. Freedom doesn't always come wrapped in celebration. Sometimes it comes in the sound of a door closing behind the man who used to control you, and realizing he no longer has a key. But for a man like him, losing control wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his downfall. After court, he spiraled. You could see it in the way he drove off, too fast, too reckless, running from the truth like it was chasing him. And it was. Because control was his oxygen, and we just cut every valve. Marcia told us to expect retaliation, not physical now, since the law was watching him like a hawk, but emotional, financial, and social. Right on schedule that night at 11:43 p.m., he started. Emails, paragraphs, rants, pages of self-pity and anger and revisionist fantasy. He blamed Lena. He blamed me. He blamed society, his job, his past, the weather, anything except himself. We didn't read half of it. We just forwarded them straight to Attorney Holt. She needed every piece of evidence for what was coming next. The next domino fell when his employer found out about the protective order. Corporate HR doesn't care about the truth of a man's soul. They care about liability. A protective order against an employee with documented aggressive behavior? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. He was placed on immediate leave, pending investigation. Translation: don't bother coming back. The news spread through his workplace like wildfire. People whispered. Co-workers avoided him. Supervisors stopped making eye contact. His image, the good husband, the reliable employee, the decent man, shattered in a single business day. Lena saw the update from a friend still working there. She didn't gloat, she didn't smile, but she sat a little straighter, and that was enough. 2 days later came the phone call from his credit union. He was officially behind on payments. Turns out the money he always had under control was a mountain of hidden debt. Lena's frozen accounts meant he couldn't use her savings to plug his holes anymore. He tried to file an emergency motion to unfreeze funds. Attorney Holt responded by filing a counter motion exposing his financial mismanagement. The judge denied his request in under 60 seconds. His face must have turned to stone in the courtroom. We weren't there to see it, but the clerk later told us he didn't speak for a full minute, just stared at the desk like it had betrayed him. Good. Let the desk speak for the women he hurt. But the real collapse, the one that cemented his descent into misery, came the following week. He showed up at church. Bold, arrogant, delusional enough to walk into a place where everyone had watched him grab my wrist at the luncheon. He expected sympathy, expected pity, expected someone, anyone, to see him as the victim. Instead, the pastor pulled him aside before he reached the front pew. I wasn't there, but a friend later shared it, word for word. Brother Carter, until the matter with your wife is resolved, we cannot allow you to participate in service. Your behavior has caused concern in our congregation. He tried to argue, but the pastor didn't budge. Humiliation, public, deep, irreversible. He stormed out, another door slammed behind him. Lena cried when she heard, not because she missed him, but because the community she once hid her pain from was now protecting her openly. That's a different kind of healing. And then came the last strike, the one that sealed everything. Attorney Holt filed for spousal asset protection, which meant Lena's retirement funds, savings, and remaining property were shielded from him forever. But she didn't stop there. She filed a motion for financial misconduct, a polite legal term meaning he abused her money. Judges hate financial abusers. They come down harder on them than almost anything else. When the ruling came in, it was brutal. He owed Lena compensation. He owed late fees. He owed penalties. He owed costs. He didn't have the money. He still doesn't. His wages, whatever wages he manages to scrape from part-time jobs, are garnished for 3 years. Lena didn't even ask for revenge. The system handed it to her, and he felt every blow. The last time we saw him was accidental. We were leaving the courthouse after filing one final document, and he was walking up the steps, unshaven, shoulders slumped, looking like a man whose world had been set on fire from the inside. He saw Lena, stopped. For the first time ever, there was no anger, only defeat. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg, maybe to blame her one last time. But Lena didn't stop walking. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She simply said, voice quiet but firm, "I survived you." And we kept walking. He stayed frozen on those courthouse steps, watching the woman he thought he owned walk away from him for the last time. His life didn't just fall apart. We dismantled it, piece by piece, the same way he tried to dismantle her. And Lena? She finally understood the truth. Freedom wasn't something she needed permission for. Freedom was something she took back. Her freedom wasn't just survival. It was rebirth. When I look back now, it's hard to believe how far we've come. My sister, the woman who once whispered apologies for the bruises she didn't deserve, now stands in her own home with sunlight on her face and peace in her chest. She sleeps through the night. She laughs again, that soft little laugh I thought I'd lost forever. She waters her plants. She answers her phone without fear. She goes to church without checking the door every 2 minutes. And sometimes when she's washing dishes or folding laundry or humming to herself, I catch her standing a little taller, like she's relearning the shape of her own body after years of shrinking. People think survival is the end of the story. It's not. Freedom is quiet, healing is slow. But both are possible, even after the worst storms. And if you're watching this, if you're someone who's ever loved a person who lost themselves inside someone else's darkness, let our story remind you, you don't have to fight alone. You don't have to stay silent. And you sure don't have to stay afraid. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing beside you to help you stand back up. If this story touched you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, tell your truth. Stories like this matter because women like my sister matter. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves and each other.